Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another breakfast with Blaha, and we're doing Greek yogurt, almond butter, frozen blueberries. All right, one of the things that most people out there have noticed is that the majority of people who train are novices. The majority of people who reach the end of their novice phase barely make it through early intermediate, and they never progress any further, or they just completely quit training. And this is approximately 90% of people who lift. Only about 10% of people who run any sort of even serious novice program of any type end up getting through the intermediate phase. They even make it to a late intermediate, let alone advanced. And the question becomes why? Number one, their mindset. It's mindset. And this is something I try to instill in clients. And I mean, I actually have a current client who's a young man, has a long way to go. He's not even been training a year. He's been training a few months, tried to kind of remake his own version of one of my novice programs, and he's a perfect example. He relies heavily on motivation. He relies heavily on motivation and unrealistic expectations. And they're not unrealistic expectations for him as an individual. They're unrealistic expectations for anybody. Think that through for a moment. If that happens for people, that's the problem. And that's really common. It's really common. So when you start looking at novice training, a couple of things happen. Number one, novice training is just not that hard. Let's be realistic. Even the most brutal novice programs, the workload is very low. The novice perceives them as difficult, but anyone who's run really hard advanced programming, we know that novice programs really aren't shit. They really aren't. They might feel heavy to you, but if you think of the total tonnage, you're using very light weights for fives. You're using lightweight. You're not getting that beat up. It feels fatiguing during it, but you're not destroyed the same way. You're not creating that deep fatigue that you get when you're moving so many tens of thousands of pounds in a workout. Because quite frankly, 225 for sets of 5 on a squat just isn't that taxing to a human being. It feels like it if you're not strong yet, but it doesn't compare with doing 405 for sets of 5. It's not even in the same ballpark as to the fatigue that sets in, even for people who can do the 405. It's easy. And it's funny because you'll get some novices who will say, oh man, this part here, this is really hard. And it's like, you think that's hard? If you really and truly believe that that's hard, and you look at it ever and say, I'm dreading it, oh man, I don't want to do this 5x5 squat with 185, it's getting tough. If you legitimately perceive that as hard and you don't change that mindset, what's going to happen when your training gets really hard? Because that's not hard. And that's the problem. They rely on motivation. Instead of relying on habits, and there's a lot of them, they got to get all psyched up. Same kids they have to have the right music. They have to have their pre-workout. They got to get in their zone to have a good workout. Those people will never be advanced. They're relying on motivation instead of focusing on habits. And people say, yeah, but they're getting into the habits. Well, not really. No, because if they need all this external motivation all the time to have a good workout, they're relying on motivation completely and psyching themselves up. That will fade. And it starts fading real fast when things get hard. And especially if they need that to make it through hard workouts, that has consequences on the recovery side. Psychological arousal impacts recovery negatively. You can get away with it when you're weak. You get away with it when you're weak. When you get strong, it's going to cause you problems if you're not very careful. Of course, most guys just up the dose to deal with that. That's the solution. You see plenty of guys who do that, who use plenty of gear. Because if recovery becomes an issue, they can just add more. And that'll fix the problem. But again, now we're burning the candle at both ends. There's a price to pay for that. So, part of their issue. And as soon as it gets hard, they stop progressing. Right? Or they try to continue to beat through novice type training without slipping into more intermediate training, looking at fatigue management, stress management, all these other things. They still try to train the way they did making their noob gains. And they just hit a wall. And when they hit that wall, what happens? They either stop progressing because they can't push through hard enough, because again, they don't have their fatigue management on point. And then they have to take more and more time off. They start missing workouts. They don't make the progress anymore. They just stop. Or they just quit going to the gym completely, which is a big chunk. They drop out. Stuff got hard now. Number two, the slow progress. This is the other thing that we have to look at. This is why we have to get rid of the motivation component for novices. They've got to rely on building habits to build discipline. And then we use discipline to train, not how we feel. No emotion involved with it. Emotionally detached. Because the progress slows. Perfect example, same kid. He had progressed so much he felt in three months because he really wanted to focus on the overhead press because of the shoulder aesthetics and the shoulder gains, and it's a manly lift and stuff I've said in the past. All right. He progressed so much on it that he had said, do you think it's a reasonable, again, because novices, especially younger kids with no experience, think like this. They assume that this progress is going to last forever. You know, if my overhead press went from 50 pounds for sets of 5 to 75 pounds for sets of 5 in 2 months, I mean, that's like 25 pounds every 2 to 3 months. Like, I'm going to be at 200 in no time. And everyone who's ever reached a 200 press is laughing their ass off at what I just said. Right? 200 presses for most drug-free guys who aren't going to get real heavy is like a lifetime goal. You might invest 5 years of your life into that goal. But these kids really think this way. Well, if it went up this quick, I'll be there in 9 months. If you bulk to 250, you have to get pretty fat. Maybe, and not even guaranteed you'll get there then. But it asked me, so do you think, while staying at a good body fat, a lean body fat, that a 300 strict press is a reasonable lifetime goal? Lean guys not on drugs hitting 300 strict press. I mean, that's like 1 in a fucking million. Maybe not even that good. That would be absurdly rare. You probably better be very genetically gifted to pull something off like that. But again, this shows the mindset that they don't listen to, oftentimes they haven't listened to the more experienced lifters, and they assume that this little short linear progress that they can do for a few months, they think it's going to last. And when it doesn't, when they go from all of a sudden, they've been adding 5 pounds here, 10 pounds there, these lifts just go up, up, up. And then when it gets hard, they stop going up, they stall. That overhead press stalls at 115 for 5. And it ends up taking them 6 months to add 5 more pounds, or 6 months to add 2.5 pounds. The gains slow. They come to a screeching halt. And they require, again, more advanced programming, better fatigue management. Start thinking about some like stimulus to fatigue, optimizing training volume. If you're not doing this stuff, it's going to come even slower. Then they're feeling beat up. The progress has stalled. And it's gotten hard. And they're relying on motivation. I just crank my music up and get mad. They're emotionally driven. And now they've had all this demotivating stuff occur. and they stop making progress. Your solutions here, the reasons novices have to get around this is number one, they have to learn to not think stuff is hard or difficult. It isn't, because it's going to get harder. And they need to accept that fact. If you want to continue to make gains for a decade or 15 years, and I'm saying this as someone, you guys have seen me squat and deadlift over 600 pounds in my 40s. Perspective. It will get harder all the time. This never gets easier. Every year that you progress, the training's going to get a little bit harder. They have to learn to accept this. Stop thinking that stuff that you're doing early on is hard or hardcore difficult, because it's not. It's going to feel harder as you go. And if it doesn't, then you're probably not training hard enough and you're not going to make progress. They got to get out of this mindset. Have to remove the emotional attachment. We have to lose this idea of motivation. We have to be emotionally motivated. No, you have to mature in your mindset with that. You have to care about fatigue management. You got to get your lifestyle in order. You have to look at the total fatigue of your workouts, knowing how much you can handle, and being mature about it. Making sure all those other factors are right. Like, you make nude games with bad lifestyle. Think you're going to get advanced without perfect sleep, without good nutrition? Not going to happen. So these are the things that novices need to fix and they need to accept early on if they want to get through the intermediate phase. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.